Now I'm going to show you how to make one of my most popular recipes, Chef AJ's famous disappearing lasagna. And it's called that because most people that try it say it's pretty much the best lasagna they've ever tried, and it disappears. People have asked me, does it freeze well? I don't know. There's never any left. So the first thing I'm going to do is make one of the two fillings. And this filling you use a food processor for. So you could actually do this the day before if you wanted to. So I'm going to start with my nuts. Usually I use pine nuts. They're my favorite, but sometimes they're just hard to find or super expensive. So cashews are perfectly fine to use, or even hemp seed. That's really good if somebody has a nut allergy. So I'm just going to process these in my food processor fitted with the edge blade. Then I'm going to add my cannellini beans. You could use tofu. That's a variation, but some people, like myself, are allergic to soy. So white beans, whether they're cannellini or Great Northern, work very well in this recipe. And then some nutritional yeast. That's what a lot of plant eaters call nooch. Some miso paste. If you're strictly salt-free, you could omit that, just to give it a tiny little bit of a kick. A little bit of crushed red pepper flakes, doing it for the kids, maybe leave it out. And some lemon juice. And lots of fresh basil. So what we're going to do is we're going to process this until smooth. It smells really good. Going to let it go a little bit longer, but what I'm going to do now is add my kale or spinach. I like to get the frozen organic, and then I defrost it on the counter overnight, squeeze out all the extra moisture. Can you believe this is a pound of kale? That's how little it is when you get the water out. Or you could use spinach. You could even use 2 pounds if you wanted to, because it's not very much. Just gives it a nice green color and bumps up the nutrition a little bit. Look what I forgot. Can't have lasagna without garlic. I'm going to be cooking the other filling that goes with this. And if I realized that that garlic was over there and I forgot it here, I just would have added it to that. So you have this really delicious, creamy filling. This actually could be a dip. Have you ever seen those dips that they put like in a sourdough bread loaf? You can use this filling of the lasagna as an amazing dip for vegetables, but it's sort of like the ricotta filling that you often see in lasagna, but it's just got this amazing flavor from the basil. And we're just going to leave that here, and then we're going to walk on over to the stove and make the other filling, and we'll come back and assemble it all right here. So now I'm going to show you how to make the cooked filling portion of Chef AJ's disappearing lasagna. First thing I'm doing is heating up my pan because I'm going to saute my onion with absolutely no oil. It's very easy to do if you have a good pan. A lot of people use nonstick or green pan or ceramic pan, but a good pan. If you're using a nonstick, just make sure it's not chipped. This is a hard anodized steel pan that I got about 30 years ago when I was a Pampered Chef consultant. It still works great. You know your pan is hot enough if you can take a little water and you just drip it, and like your little beads of water, they just kind of dance around. So it's nice and hot. So now I'm going to put in my chopped onion. I'm using a red onion. You can use any color. And we're just going to let it do its thing. You know how they say you can't hurry love? Well, you can't hurry onions either. You just need to let them hang out. When you're doing a dry saute or a water saute or using non-salted or low-sodium vegetable broth, always have the liquid nearby so that when you do need to add it, you don't have to go run to the sink. Actually, always have all your ingredients nearby. That's called mise en place, because if you have everything you need, you don't have to be running and looking for it. So I'm just going to let these hang out. I'm not going to stir them yet. When they're ready, I'll stir them. I can get these as brown and caramelized as I want without any oil. Oil's really kind of a waste of calories. It's a waste of money. It makes cleanup much more difficult. You really don't need it to cook anything. I wait until my onions are done before I add my garlic. And with garlic, it's one of those things. If a little's good, a lot's probably better, but add as much or as little as you like. And then the other ingredient that goes into the filling is mushrooms. Now, I'll be honest, I don't like mushrooms, but I can eat them in here because what I did is before I marinated them, I cut them really small in the food processor so they don't look like mushrooms. And I have fooled people with this that don't like mushrooms. But if you do like mushrooms, you can just use sliced mushrooms. These are the Baby Bella. And when you have time, if you know you're making this recipe, marinate these in advance overnight. It just cooks faster and it's better. And then they give up a lot of their liquid anyway. And the other liquid that's in here is either your choice, soy sauce, if you can have soy, low sodium tamari, coconut aminos, or if you're completely salt-free, you can use California balsamic in a flavor like Gilroy garlic, also works great. You kind of have to listen because you kind of know when it's time to start stirring. And you can see how it's starting to get brown. And then if it starts to stick, and this won't stick, but if you feel like it's starting to stick, we're starting to get a little brown, you can just take the smallest amount of liquid like that. You can turn it down a little bit if it's too high. Higher the heat, the faster it will cook. Caramelized onions are a great addition to anything you eat, say plant burgers, for example, hash browns. And believe it or not, you can do this in advance. Let them cool and freeze them, and then you'll always have them. But really the secret is a good pan and a hot pan. I haven't used oil in, I want to say over 20 years, oil or sugar. A little bit more water. When you caramelize onions like this, it takes the bite out of them. You know, raw onions are certainly good and healthy, but cooked onions are much mellower. Same for garlic. For people that can't eat onions or garlic, I don't have a workaround for you, unfortunately, because to me, that really is the foundation of any cooking, but especially plant-based cooking, and especially when you're not using salt. I've always had a saying, everything starts with an onion. And everything ends with a cookie. No, it should end with a cookie. All right, so we could go as long as we want on this. Now, if you have an Instant Pot electric pressure cooker, you can do this with the saute function, but I find it takes a lot longer than doing it on high heat on the stove. So these are looking, as Larry David would say, pretty good. So now I'm going to add the garlic. I know I've seen a lot of chefs on YouTube, they put the garlic and onion at the same time. I was taught in culinary school not to do that because garlic can actually burn. So I wait until my onions are done and then I add my garlic. And I go by sound when it needs a little bit more water. You know, I know a lot of people use broth and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that unless you're making it yourself, it's kind of expensive. And I find when the recipes are really good, which I hope you'll think mine are, and you have enough flavor, I don't think the broth makes much difference. Now, if you're drinking it as a beverage, of course, it tastes better than water, but I've never really wanted to go to that extra expense of using broth. But you can. Then you got the cartons and packaging. I used to make my own, but I really never noticed a difference in the taste of the recipes. So, now we're going to add our marinated mushrooms. By marinating them in advance, it will take less time to cook. This is one of the favorite recipes at Rancho La Puerta that we make in our hands-on cooking classes. When you do it like this, it looks a little bit more like ground beef than mushrooms. And if I need more liquid, I can add the liquid from here instead of water. But mushrooms do have inherently a lot of water that they need to give up. So we will just kind of let this cook. You know, lasagna is not something that most people, myself included, make every day. I feel like it's a little bit, not that it's difficult, but it has more steps than just throwing things into an Instant Pot. And it's something I would make more for a special occasion, like my husband's birthday or a potluck. We're just two people, and it makes, 12 to 16 pieces. So that's a lot. There's a lot of options, though. You know, with the noodles today, you can get so many gluten-free noodles. You can even get lasagna noodles made out of hearts of palm, which is a vegetable. And for people that don't do any noodles, and of course, there's gluten-free noodles and there's the regular lasagna noodles. I am lazy, I'll be honest. And I always use the no-boil noodles because you don't have to cook them You just have to make sure they're smothered in sauce and they cook right in the oven. But a couple of times when we were making this at Rancho La Puerta, they just couldn't get lasagna noodles. So what we did is we took a mandolin and we took eggplant and zucchini and we layered all these fillings. It was actually, I think, maybe even better than using the pasta. So we're just going to have to cook this until all the liquid is absorbed and this kind of has like a glazed or glossy look. I think mushroom is like cilantro. It's either you love it or you don't. It's like love it or shove it. But I know they're good for me, so I'll eat them even though they're not my favorite. You know, the best way I've ever eaten mushrooms is prepared by a local chef in Rancho Cordova who owns Vegan Fresh to You. His name is Chef John. And what he does is he takes these giant king oyster mushrooms and he takes this very sharp julienne peeler and he makes them into noodles. So they look exactly like soba noodles, but they're mushrooms. And for some reason, when it's a soup, I don't know, they're mushrooms. I love them. Tried to do it myself, but it just didn't come out. You know, so this could take 10 or 15 minutes just because this is 2 pounds of mushrooms and they were marinating. So there's just a lot of liquid that has to cook down. You could cover it, but you just want to be mindful and not step away. And if you know you're making this for a party, you can do the steps in advance. You could even assemble it in advance and cook it the next day. If you were going to freeze it, I've never frozen it, but I would say probably I would cook it first and then freeze the leftovers. But it might work if you freeze the whole thing. I just don't have that kind of freezer space for a 9 by 13 or 11 by 14 inch lasagna pan. Most of the liquid is absorbed, so it's very close to being ready. I like having a big pan. I love the rounded sides because it's so much easier and things don't fall out. This is called a saute pan. Because the mushrooms give up so much liquid, I didn't have to add any liquid to this. I'm going to call that done, and I'm just going to push it up on the sides because as I turn the heat off, it will continue to cook a little bit. Then I'm going to go back to the counter and show you how to assemble it. So now I'm going to show you the last step. Well, I guess eating it is the last step, but the last step in the preparation, how to put it together. So I'm using a 9 by 13 inch pan. You can certainly use an 11 by 14 dedicated lasagna pan, but this is what I had. And then I'm going to take my marinara and put it on the bottom. I made this myself and I have a video to show you how to do it. But if you want to use your own recipe or store bought, that's perfectly fine. I just want it to be spread all across the bottom because these are no boil noodles and they must touch something if they're going to cook. These happen to be gluten-free. You want to get them so that the sauce touches the noodles. You can break these if they don't fit, but I don't mind a little bit of overlap. If you want, you can even put another little bit layer of sauce there so that it touches. You can just spread it around. That's important for the no-boil noodle to cook. Where's my offset spatula when I need it? Okay, so then I'm going to take half of my filling and place it on top. Now this is where you might want to use food service gloves or wet hands because it's a very, very thick filling and you want to spread it out as evenly as possible. Try to get about half. You could take it out and measure it if you want to be exact, but I don't worry about it because it all cooks up nicely. Just going to wet my hands. And then I'm just going to kind of move it around. It smells so good. I know I say that a lot, but it's true. It really does. The fresh basil, the garlic, the cooked onion. So it will, spread a little bit in the cooking, but you just want to try to get it as evenly as possible. I would say you could double the filling, but it's really so rich, with the miso and the pine nuts. That looks pretty good. So then we're going to take half of the cooked mushroom filling And put that over the top. And then spread that over. So it's okay because they're now kind of mixed together, so it'll be fine. Oh, so good. It does take a little longer to make a recipe like this, but it is so worth it, and you will wow your company. So now another layer of noodles. You could use the boil noodles if you want. It just takes so long to boil them and then to separate them. Just like to use a little sauce just to make sure that the noodle is covered. Make sure whatever sauce you use, make sure you love it, because that's what your lasagna is going to taste like. And then the rest of our filling. I remember making this for 300 doctors once at a dinner at USC that Dr. Colin Campbell spoke at. I had to hire a team of people. And it was hats off to chefs that do this every day for multiple people, like Chef Bravo. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. So we just want to get every drop of this filling on the next layer. No drop is left behind. And again, you know what they say, fingers were invented before forks. So just spread it out. And you know, if you are avoiding nuts, you can omit them in the filling. It's a cup for the whole recipe, but you absolutely can. Won't be quite as rich, but it'll still be really, really good. And now the remainder of the mushroom filling. And then we'll spread that on top. And then there's room for one more layer of noodles and another layer of sauce. I think I'll do this one this way. See how many I get. And then smother the top with sauce. It's better to have too much sauce than not enough. You can always use it as pasta sauce or even freeze it. And then we're going to sprinkle some faux Parmesan on the top. And whether or not you want to add the olives, it's entirely up to you. Kind of makes it look pretty, but you don't have to. Make sure you cover all the noodles. Now, this does take about an hour to cook. And you always want to let things like lasagna rest for about 10 minutes before slicing if you want to get a nice even piece. So this is my faux Parmesan. You want to sprinkle that on the top. You can also have this table side for people if they want to add it to their own piece. It looks and tastes like Parmesan cheese, only healthier. Cooking is, for me, very relaxing, therapeutic. You can listen to your favorite podcast while you're doing it. Batch cooking is the key to eating healthy, though, let me tell you. And so we've actually done this at Rancho La Puerta with green olives, and it was actually quite good. So we just place them over the top. I'm a little OCD. I kind of like them in a straight line until I get bored, and then I just throw them all on. But, you know, you could use chopped olives too. And again, you don't have to use them at all. I don't know. I just kind of think it's a little pretty. I have these little black dots. I've never tried Kalamata on this, so I can't tell you if that would be good. But we've tried black and we've tried green. Just the sauce smells amazing. I made the sauce in an Instant Pot. It's a really easy recipe. It cost me about $1 to make a single batch of sauce. It's too expensive to buy jarred pasta and marinara sauce these days. I've seen them for $9, $12. I'm more interested in spending $1 because that's about what it costs me to make the equivalent of one jar. And 10 minutes in the Instant Pot, no cutting up onion or sauteing. So easy. And I've got a few more here. I remember the first time I served this, it was my brother's a physician, and I once catered a party for him and for his referring doctors. And I remember this doctor said, "This is disgustingly good." Well, I don't know if that's a compliment, but I think he meant it as one. But it's pretty good, I'll tell you. Haven't had any complaints on this one, other than it just takes a little longer than throwing things in an Instant Pot. It's even better the second day. So now it's ready. Oh my gosh, it's so heavy. It's like, this is really hardy. So I'm going to put this in the oven, and after I bake it, I'll show you what it looks like when it's done.
So when you take the lasagna out of the oven, let it set at least 10 minutes so that you cut a beautiful piece out and enjoy.